the soulless version of food versus the soul-filled version of food. I'm really here just to facilitate because Drew has most of the thoughts on this that I think are revolutionary. And yeah, super excited to be here. I hope you enjoy the conversation. And I just want to remind everyone, we have thoughts, we have ideas. We're always open to learning. So please share yours and help us learn. Okay, so one disclaimer for those of you watching this on YouTube, if there are any people watching this on YouTube, Drew's got a fly zapper behind his head, which we didn't notice when we set up the camera, but we're just gonna run with it.
Yeah.
It's that time of year; flies are everywhere.
That's the benefits of watching it on YouTube.
Which actually
you
is
get to see flies.
Yeah, maybe you might hear the recording, but it goes zap zap. I think that's a perfect segue into how foolish we were to plan a chicken slaughtering on Friday, which then is also, I mean, we're slaughtering our own chickens. The perfect segue into talking about lab-grown foods. But
are we going to address the foolishness? Because I feel like we got to start there.
We got to start with the foolishness, yeah.
The foolishness was that we were extremely distracted. I don't like to say we're busy because that insinuates that it's out of our control. We chose to do a lot of things.
Well, one of the main...
first got chickens. Hold on.
Okay.
When we first got chickens, which meant that I wasn't paying attention to the food rationing at all.
Okay, there we go.
I had other things. We have raised a lot of batches of broilers, and I kind of made the assumption that our feeders would be...
I'm shaking my head vigorously.
More concerned about how much food they got.
That he's insinuating that our 12 and 14-year-old would be rationing.
And 7-year-old. Well, 7-year-old. Yeah.
And paying attention to how much and when. And they just do what they're told.
So we still have gone through roughly the same amount of feed, just over a much longer period of time. So thus landing us for a July slaughter of these dinosaur-sized chickens now, which is going to be its own fun thing because I like to bring the chickens in about 4 pounds. And these guys are probably going to be like 6 to 7.
I mean, I'm less worried about that and more worried about it's the hottest weekend of the year.
Well, it depends on where you are in the world. So it's going to be like 98 degrees. And because it's God's country down here in the South, it'll probably be 98% humidity also.
Yeah.
And I'm very excited about that. I enjoy hard work in the heat. So.
Which brings me back to the flies. One potential outcome is to have a lot of flies.
Yeah, probably will have flies.
So anyway, that's what we're doing. And why in the heck are we doing that when we could just be growing our meat in a lab? That would be easy.
I feel like, which brings us into, we could also just buy our meat from the grocery store.
Okay, so I was, I think the like world I live in, my circle, is all in agreement that lab grown meat is not ideal. Like lab grown foods, GMOs, we're sort of all in that camp. At least the people I listen to or see in my feed or talk to in person generally are all kind of on the same page there. And I was a little bit blown away to be in an event and meet somebody who, I would have thought the event was like an herb-based thing. And I would have thought the person would have, like everyone there would have sort of been on the same page too. But just in conversation, it came up that their particular stance was that lab growing meat was really the way to support the population. And that was, I was a little bit taken aback by that. And it wasn't, I think we had a certainly
heated discussion,
but I think we both left not angry at each other, which I think is normal, right? Like we should be able to have those conversations and get with people who make us have those conversations and challenge us. So it kind of felt good to have a conversation with somebody that I didn't agree with and not, storm away angry. I mean, I don't generally storm away angry I like heated discussion. So I did reassure the person.
You do like storming away angry also.
No, I don't. Thank you for misleading our listeners. But I don't feel like that's true of me. But I don't like to walk away from a good conversation.
That is very true.
And it was
We've got a lot of good bargains from this.
from not walking away from a good conversation. Anyway, I was a little bit like, oh wow, I didn't know there were people who were really like kind of all in on that idea. And he had some valid points. But none of them, I guess my ultimate, and then I'm going to like just pass the buck to Drew because he's got a lot of good thoughts on this, but my ultimate thought really came down to, as I sort of considered it as like the weekend progressed, I started thinking like, okay, how do I really feel and why do I really feel that way? So, I mean, just the idea of making food in a laboratory just fundamentally feels wrong to me. And I was like, okay, but why is it? Why do I feel that way? And, what is some like backing? And fundamentally, I think it comes back to this idea that we've already tried that. We've already tried it and it hasn't worked, because I think what we've already tried is we tried manipulating nature to grow in our squares, right? And we've created these systems of agriculture that we called more efficient, more scientific, more productive. And we've been doing that. And
it's not working.
It didn't work. And so what I really think is that the laboratory method is the next step on that path. And I say, let's retract from that path altogether because it doesn't work. And all we're going to find out at the end is that it doesn't work for a variety of reasons, for nutrition reasons, for soul reasons, for earth reasons, for, environmental reasons. It doesn't serve the people, even though it sounds great. It sounds smart even. I think sometimes what works on paper, you just can't know how it doesn't work in real life. So anyway, that's kind of what I came back to.
Yeah, and I think that kind of segues perfect into like our thought of like, as we started discussing it more, it's essentially the natural evolution of our food system though. Like, and that's like within our, I don't know if echo chamber.
It's the natural or the unnatural?
Natural in the sense of, the next step.
Not really. I feel like natural is not the.
How else would you say that?
I don't know. There's a word for that, but
the evolutionary step? I don't know.
Clear next step.
The clear next step. Like everything about. Okay, what I was going to say.
The trajectory.
The natural trajectory.
Not natural trajectory.
Everybody within our echo chamber, maybe, of people agree that or think that lab-grown meat is wrong. However, within that same group of people, a lot of people go in and buy the 99-cent a pound steak or the $4 chicken.
So I did want to warn people, I'm here to facilitate. So I know that we can come across as really like preachy, maybe. And that's certainly not what my intention is. I think I know what I believe, and I kind of am constantly trying to make sure what I believe has foundation. And so I usually have a reason. I usually can spew that off, and that can come across as kind of dogmatic. I don't know. But I'm here today to say that Drew's going to say a lot of things that maybe are a little bit like implicating that we're slackers.
I might be offensive, but I mean it in the best kind of way. I've been thinking about it for myself because I think meat is an easy one to pick at. But really you can go in the grocery store and pick on anything. And the reality is that the majority of the food in the center aisles of the grocery store are lab grown foods.
Well, we've been making compromises towards convenience for a long time. So that trajectory is going to move more towards convenience, more towards compromise. And that's what lab grown meat is. It's a bigger compromise and a bigger convenience.
Can we say that like cereal is lab grown food? I mean,
oh yeah. I mean, at this point, yeah.
Like, I mean, like when I started thinking about that, like popsicles, like you go in there and get like a push pop, that's a lab grown product.
Right.
Like there's nothing natural about that. Like
we had an Israeli
intern, and over the week, and he was like, his biggest letdown of the United States was Gatorade. He had no idea how bad it tasted.
Well, he said, all my sports teams drink it, and I drink it, and oh, it was such a huge disappointment. And I just couldn't help but laugh hysterically because I drank it yesterday because I felt like I was super dehydrated, and the first sip I was thinking was going to be so refreshing, and it was still the same disappointment. But
I think it was refreshing.
Oh, okay.
But that's a lab grown product.
It's not real.
So I think that we're almost victims, like hashing it out a little bit more now. I think we're almost victims of a war of big ag versus the lab.
It's not even like, I don't even know how much agriculture is involved in Gatorade, like.
No, I mean with the meats.
Oh, sure.
Specifically with lab grown meat.
Do you think cattle farmers are big backer? Well, actually, so that was the irony with the person who I was talking to, is that those people who went in and destroyed the Amazon to grow cattle are now saying, yeah, that didn't work, so here's what we're going to do next. And I'm like, wait, maybe they shouldn't be the ones deciding what we're going to do next.
Right.
I mean, maybe we should, take the reins back and say, yeah, no, you guys have put us in a really terrible position and globally, and you don't get to make this next call.
I'm afraid we already cut the reins off the horse. There's no going back from this one.
Anyway.
So, I mean, that's gotten us to the point where I think that, back to the 99-cent steak, like, that is a product that has had every effort to be produced as unnatural as possible. From the way that the cattle are raised, from what they're fed, the antibiotics they're injected with, the chemicals that they're injected with, when they're processed, the way they're processed, the chemicals that are sprayed on them when they're processed, the chemicals that are sprayed on them when they're packaged,
and they're treated
that they're in, all of that, like from start to finish, from birth to consumer, is an unnatural process. And
it's a conveyor belt.
Right. It's a conveyor belt. The effort is to produce the exact same product every time, over and over again. And why would we not? Then why do we all of a sudden get upset?
Not only that, you get a package of meat, and how many cows are in that package?
Like an average 1 pound of ground beef is like over 100 cows. I think it might be like 1,000 cows are in one package. That's nuts. And so now we stand in the grocery store upset that the next step is they said, hey, let's take the cows out of it and we'll just put it all in a lab. And it sounds
good. I mean, if you're any kind of care about the animals, then you're yeah, of course, let's take the animals out of it.
I mean, to me, I'm kind of at the point where I kind of agree with that. Why are we making cattle suffer?
If your choice is between this one almost atrocity versus this other atrocity, right? Why would... Yeah.
The lab grown is less of an atrocity to me than the CAFO lots. But
ooh, that one kind of stings a little.
Yeah. I mean, that's the reality. It brings the meat section closer to the rest of the grocery store.
Right. Well, here's what I also see too.
Now we can sell Gatorade and quote unquote meat. And it's the same product. You can make them both in the same factory. Well,
and we're all happy to sing Circle of Life, right? We're all happy and yeah, that's so true. Everything goes around and comes around and there's this beauty there. There's nothing cyclical. Anyway, I'm about... Cyclical. There we go. About lab grown meat. There's no cycle there, right? You bring in a product, you turn it into something else, I guess. I don't even know.
But then there's no cycle in.
But it doesn't return. Right. There's no, potentially no, but here's what we're eradicating.
I mean, it's not those cows in the CAFO lot are not having calves that are then raised up that way.
But one of the detriments of eating food that's not real food. So you eat junk food, it fills you up. You don't eat other food. You're missing this opportunity for nutrition, right? So it's not just about having the bad nutrition. It's about missing the opportunity for getting something in your body that's doing good. And so that's what I see in both of these scenarios is we've got this opportunity to do good because cattle are a part of the ecosystem. Cows are a part of the ecosystem. Ruminants, grazing, building topsoil, like all of that is a part of the ecosystem. In both of these methods, we're not only creating a void, we're creating a place where we're missing an opportunity to fix what's broken, to heal what's sick. And so that's really for me, like, okay, our role here is to be a piece of that cycle. And if we are not, if we're separating ourselves and literally putting walls around the things that we contribute most to our ecosystem, it's only causing further damage. And we may not know fully what that damage is yet, but we'll learn over time. We will. And it will impact our health. It will impact the health of our environment around us. We cannot fix environment outside of environment. It has to be fixed from within, because it has to be a part of the cycle, this pattern, right? And so I think that what I most oppose to about the lab-grown meat is that it is giving us this out from nature, that what we need right now is to connect more to it. I mean, why we're sick is because we aren't there. We aren't in communion with that as much as we ought to be. So I don't know. I think
another element to it, though, is like to be the fake meat advocate. Is that with the CAFO grown, we're also consuming an animal that is sick, that has suffered. And I definitely think that there's ramifications, spiritual ramifications, emotional ramifications.
Well, even the spiritual, like missing of like, okay, the process of participating in the raising, growing, rearing, feeding, and then even slaughtering of an animal, which, like that's a big ask, right? Like, sorry, I don't want you to eat. I don't want you to eat lab-grown meat. I want you to raise and slaughter and all. Yeah. Like, yes, I think that there is an integral part of our society, culturally speaking, spiritually speaking, health speaking, that people are lacking, that has to do with that interaction. It absolutely has to do with saying, that's icky, I don't want to do it. And then being able to say that and still live. It's completely unnatural.
For me, that's where I say, I feel like I'm making friends with everybody. For that, like vegans and vegetarians, I say like, good on you. Like if you say gross, I don't want to deal with death in animals, or I don't want animals to suffer, I'm not going to eat them.
Right.
Then good on you. Like, I think that's great. Right. No,
you have to make, that's a conscious decision of like, I can't handle that, so I'm not going to participate.
I have much more respect for that than someone that goes in and says that and then buys a 99-cent steak.
Yes, because it's clean, neat and tidy.
Right.
But I mean, the spiritual void of just not participating and not being willing to participate in that, I think is a really, like, we're feeling the repercussions of that in so many different ways. We're feeling it in psychosis and depression and disconnect and feeling separate from, and like searching for feeling those highs and lows with like the scroll or whatever, I mean, there's so many different things I think that are repercussions of that separation that, if you get back to it, if you come back to that and you, I mean, ultimately suffer through that too. It's not a fun day. It's not like I'm like, oh yeah, I can't wait till chicken slaughter day. Like, and there are some people who are like excited about being a participant in that, but I think it's because ultimately they sense that that's what would be good for them, is to feel that, to experience that, and to know the whole picture, and to be a participant in the whole picture and take responsibility for that on some level. So anyway, yeah, I don't know. This is a really big topic that I think is pretty near and dear to us and probably a lot of you as well. But I do think that there's controversy where there shouldn't be controversy, and there's answers that are very industrial answers. To me, I think that the thing is that fake meat is not going to feed the world. Well, that's the
like big selling
argument. Yeah.
It's like, we'll just make enough in the factories. And like you have said, like the more that we as humanity say we are not part of nature, we are controllers of nature. Mm-hmm. Essentially in some ways, like, God, stand aside. We've got this.
Right.
We can do this, instead of looking at us as part of a complex ecosystem.
Right. The irony to me is I think that's what's happened with our medicine too, right? We've gone from let's make this in a factory because I can capitalize on it that way. I can make as much as I want, and I'll make a medicine that can save the world. But where are those medicines? Because I mean, if you know people who need medications, they're not cheap.
They're not really healing
super
people.
accessible, and they're certainly not bringing the healing that they were hoping for either, and for the most part. So yeah, I mean, it's like, okay, that's exactly what we tried to do with medicine, and it isn't working.
So that's my ultimate argument is like, I don't understand why people are surprised that that's where meat is.
Next step.
Yeah, like to me, it's the natural.
Well, I think it's process. A little bit, it's the shock of like the ChatGPT too. It's like the same length of like it's almost like a replication of something that before needed a soul. Before you needed a soul to write an article. Now you don't. Before you needed a soul to have meat.
That's if you're operating under the assumption that ChatGPT doesn't have a soul.
Right.
Which refer back to our ChatGPT podcast.
So it's like these huge leaps towards this soulless living that is, I think it's real sketch.
I mean, in some ways, like it's just like, if you're making the argument that
is it really living anymore?
Cattle in a CAFO lot have a soul. Like, why are we not more up in arms about? I mean, have you seen
I'm so up in arms. I raise my own meat.
Yeah,
because I'm not participating.
Go up there and free all the cows. I mean,
should.
It's like, yeah, it's heartbreaking to see. And someone told me one time they saw a CAFO lot of buffalo, and they said that was like next level. Is like the ultimate free roaming animal was like.
Well, I remember at some point somebody said you can't get buffalo that was raised in a CAFO because they can't live like that.
Yeah, apparently they're doing it.
They figured it out.
But it was like, and to me, it's like, well, hopefully they figure out how to grow buffalo in a lab so that we don't have to have buffalo suffering like that.
Oh, yeah. I mean, it's just such a big topic, I think.
I mean, so I feel like we can't end there. We have to end with a solution. And our solution is to connect with farmers. Yeah, like Lacey said, not everybody can grow their own, kill their own, but you can connect with farmers that do, on a small scale. And
and people will say, well, I don't have enough money for that. Right. And, I get it. I do. Inflation is a real thing, and we are.
But here's what I'll say to that is, if you don't have enough to that and you're buying the 99-cent steak, you're funding the next step, which is lab grown meat. So get ready to be a vegetarian and a vegan, or prioritize meat from real animals grown by real farmers.
Yeah.
That might be a harsh statement, but I think that's the reality of it. I mean, it's the same thing of like, us buying the cereal in the grocery store aisle. Like I was just talking with Steve, Chef Steve, about like, he's trying his hardest to source all the products from locally. But like, I mean, how hard is it for us to like know where our salt comes from, know where our sugar comes from, know where our flour comes from? Like,
well, and I mean, we've talked about this before, like the whole like, okay, but I'm prepping, I'm storing it all away, I'm saving it all up, which, there's some amount of wisdom in having like a stash, but there's more wisdom in just finding the source.
Right. And there's people like, he's masterfully, like I thought I was really good at it, but he's like next level.
Well, it's always comforting when you find somebody who's more obsessed with.
Yeah.
Because you're like,
it really is.
Oh, thank heavens I'm not the craziest person in the room.
But because of that, like,
he makes a
maybe we can reverse this, like, I don't think the answer is in the grocery store. So in some ways, it's kind of like the fake meat is like irrelevant, like it should be a wake up call as to the way we're headed. But the CAFO lot beef should have been a wake up call too. For some reason, you stash it away in the Midwest and you don't have to look at it or think about it, and you just buy it, fry it up, cook it up, and eat
it goes back to the sterility, the sterile element that we've been pursuing for so long, right? Like it's just, okay, I want everything to be clean, 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 clean. And life is not in the clean. Life is in the dirty. Life-giving things are in the mess and the gross and the hard. And we want things clean, convenient, and easily consumable. And that is not where the life is. So how can, I don't think like, I think Drew's right about like, saying your step forward is to connect with your local farmer and look here, maybe it's not a whole or all or none situation. Maybe it's look, I'm going to do better for one meal a week, and one meal a week is going to be holy, soulful, right?
Yeah, I mean, I think like that is our most magical meals is when, and I feel like we've been working at it for years and years, but like, you know, with the food club now, like there's sometimes where we sit down to dinner and we're like, we know every piece of this meal came from somebody that we know, like we know, not just we know them like from the farmer's market. We know them like we know their kids, we know what they're going through this week, you know, like I mean, we are connected to them on a community level. And that
and look, that takes work.
It takes so much work.
It takes a lot of work. Yeah. But the work is that messy part that's absolutely worth it. And I mean, you know, we're obsessed with community, but that is the part that I think we've shut. It's that, you know, I was talking to somebody the other day about, you know, business in general. It's hard to get people to show up to things. They don't want to learn anything. Like we're just overwhelmed with information. And what we really need is just to reconnect, because we've given up so much to this idea of convenience. You know, like our groceries show up on our doorstep. We don't interact with the person at the register anymore, which, you know, I know 3/4 of the people who work at our Food Lion too, not like so intensely, but pretty well.
You recognize their face.
I recognize their face. I know their name. I know where they live. I know their kids. Like, so there is an element of like, we give that up when we don't just go to the grocery store regularly. Right. Which is maybe what we do. Maybe your goal for this week is to just not have the groceries show up at your doorstep, or not order one thing on Amazon and go to an actual local store and pay a little more and take the time to know somebody. I don't know. Like it just is one little thing at a time. And sure, we take advantage of the conveniences sometimes. We do. And I think our goal is to make more of an effort not to do that. To do that, you know, less and less of that. And honestly, the truth is, like, the less of that we do, the easier our life becomes, because, you know, we were talking about, oh, we're going out of town. Who's going to take care of the animals? And we had a laundry list of people who were like, yeah, I would do it, you know, and that's a big deal. And we also, you know, just know we have the support of, if we need something, those people will show up. And that's a huge relief too.
Well, and those people know that we'll show up for them also. Yeah. You know, like I'm working on I
hope they know that.
Yeah. Working on making more tallow. And so I'm like talking with our beef farmers about like, you know, that thing. And like, I mean, they know that like we are fully committed to getting beef from them, or getting, you know, chicken or whatever, vegetables. Like it's this reciprocal community aspect that's just missing when you go to lab grown food. Because the reality is lab grown food.
Oh, it's not just lab grown. It was missing before that, but
they don't care. Like, you know, if people buy 12 burgers, they'll make 12 burgers. If they, you know, like, it's not like a farmer is growing a cow and that cow needs to be.
I think so like going back, because lab grown meat has been happening, I think the real controversy starts with them not labeling it as lab grown. And I think that the truth is, if you can't tell the difference, what Drew's sort of saying is, what difference does it make?
Right.
Because, you know, the difference is in knowing your farmer. The difference is in eating one cow at a time. The difference is knowing the full process and seeing the cow before it dies and being a part of the process of it dying. And, you know, same with chicken and same with all the other meats that we eat. You know, I think that is true. Like, what difference does it make? If you look at the counter at the grocery store shelf, like, I think it either has equally bad ramifications.
Yeah.
So
that's crazy.
Or good, I guess, depending on how you look at it, because we are not the end all be all, and we do not have all the answers, nor do we claim to. And if you want to seek outside expertise, please do. Like, that's our disclaimer. But yeah, this is where we land. If you land in the same place, you know, tell us about it. If you don't, tell us about that too. But you're probably listening because you do.
Yeah. Hey, if you don't, I'd love to hear your reasoning.
If you want to be on a podcast and argue, maybe we should do that.
That'd be super fun.
Wouldn't that be fun?
Let's talk about it. Not argue. Have a discussion.
Arguing is okay. Arguing was never.
Yeah.
I don't know. Why does it have a negative connotation? Is arguing okay? Anyway, thanks y'all for listening. Hope you're not feeling too heavy about this conversation, and maybe you have a little hope about the future. But we'll, stay connected. We'll talk to you again soon.